Bear down, Chicago Bears. Bear down. It looks like the mock drafts are suddenly favoring Justin Fields. Now, will that mean that Justin Fields is the guy in Chicago? I don't know the answer to that because these mock drafts, they take little pieces of information, they glean off of random comments in different places. There's sometimes no validity to them. They're just running through the cycle. An example of that would be NBC Sports Chicago. Every day has a new mock draft. And in that mock draft, every day they take Caleb Williams until suddenly today they're not taking Caleb Williams. And there are a few things that go into this. Like, for example, do you take the best player overall? If you take the best player overall, is Caleb Williams the best player overall? Now, there are questions about Caleb Williams. Do you know who there's no questions about? Marvin Harrison Jr. The only question that you have with Marvin Harrison Jr. is how is he 4 inches taller and 40 pounds heavier than his dad and still runs faster? Those are the only questions. Um, is Caleb Williams a generational athlete? Is Marvin Harrison Jr.? I mean, it seems like the consensus is that Marvin Harrison certainly is, but Caleb Williams, maybe, maybe not. Also, Calvin Ridley's come up in the conversation right now. So perhaps there's some moves to be made for the Chicago Bears that we haven't seen yet or that we haven't felt yet. Maybe there's something bubbling under the surface, and we're going to try to break that down as best we can today. Now, if you like this kind of content, then make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the like button on the way in and leave a comment. Let me know if you like the content. If there's anything else that you'd like to see, anything else you'd like to hear. I should warn you that I do think that the Chicago Bears are better by sticking with Justin Fields for now. I'm not a Justin Fields maxi in so much as I think that he's the best quarterback. I'm not delusional, I should say. I don't think that Caleb Williams offers a better option in the long term. I just don't think that that's the case. Now, I do make the case, and I do understand that quite honestly, there is some arguments to be made that you could save money in drafts, you could save money on your payroll if you were to swap to Caleb Williams, and I don't think that Caleb Williams is anything near a tremendous downgrade from Justin Fields. So the point to this is, number one, I am a Chicago Bears fan. Number two, I am a Justin Fields fan, but I'm a Chicago Bears fan, number one. Number three, if Caleb Williams is the guy, I support Caleb Williams 100%, and I wish him nothing but success. And I hope that we have great success and tremendous success with him as the quarterback of the Chicago Bears, if that is the move and that is the play. So, with that being the case, there's a lot to go over, a lot of crazy news that's been happening here, and a lot of interesting things. Now, I've said previously that I don't think that there's any benefit to the Washington Commanders for trading up to get the first pick. But now we're talking about Washington wanting to trade up for the first pick. And I don't know whether that's real or not. I think the logical move to get the most value out of anything. And good morning to everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you hit the like button on the way in. The best move would be the New England Patriots, because the Patriots would be able to give a better package, I think, and they would be incentivized to swap between the Washington Commanders and the Chicago, but like they would be motivated to move up above the Washington Commanders, maybe wanting to get Caleb Williams. Washington Commanders would then, of course, quote unquote, settle for, which I don't think, by the way, that they are settling, but they would settle for Drake May. Now, we're at this, here's where we are, right? We're at the spot where there's questions about, is Drake May better than Caleb Williams? Now, for those of you that are in the Caleb Williams camp, that's nonsense. There's no way that we're going to be talking about that. There's no way that that's going to be the case. But guess what? Guess what? Broadly speaking, there's a lot of conversation about whether Drake May is better than Caleb Williams. But guess what? There's no real conversation about whether anybody is better than Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, Malik Neighbors obviously makes that argument and made that argument public when Malik did not win the Blitnikoff Award as the nation's best receiver, despite his statistics. However, he's the only person making that argument. Now, where does that leave us? Well, let's go over some of the news, and then we'll break that we'll break that down. And thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in today. Very important. And make sure you hit the like button on the way in and subscribe to the channel. Helps me out tremendously. Bears cornerback Jaylon Johnson seals the NFC's win over the AFC in the Pro Bowl. Jaylon Johnson coming in big time. Star pass rusher Montez Sweat. By the way, did you see? If you did not see it, Montez Sweat was just record breaking in his rundown in the gridiron gauntlet. I mean, like he was up here hitting balls out of the sky. So it's unbelievable here. So Jaylon Johnson, the AFC was down by less than a touchdown as they stood only a few yards from the goal line, and the NFC needed an outstanding defensive play to seal the game. Johnson answered the call using the entirety of his large frame to bat away C.J. Stroud's pass from standout Chargers receiver Cleenan Allen, claiming the win for the NFC as time expired. Oh, I'm sorry. What happened? Jaylon Johnson from the Chicago Bears was dunking on Texas quarterback C.J. Stroud. You mean that C.J. Stroud who was inferior in college to Justin Fields? Yeah, it's the same one. CJ Stroud had a great season, by the way. I feel like I'm doing a discredit by saying something like that and jokingly making a reference to him being inferior to Justin Fields, when in fact, in the NFL, he's had a tremendous season, but in every way that matters. And I think that this should be an indication to you that coaching does matter. CJ Stroud had a superior season to Justin Fields. So we're hoping to see some changes in the Chicago Bears staff such that we start to see some really good production out of Justin Fields if Justin Fields is that guy going forward. Johnson didn't get much opportunity to display the skills that got him to the Pro Bowl in the first place, but he came up when it was needed the most. So shout out to Jaylon Johnson, who went absolutely bonkers. 4 interceptions this year and 10 pass deflections. Now, Montez Sweat. Guys, if you did not, I would urge you to go watch what happened here with Montez Sweat in the gridiron gauntlet. It was absolutely bonkers. This man is getting way up there. And what you're doing is you're running through a series of challenges, right? He is smacking this ball. This is ridiculously high. So the Gridiron Gauntlet is a full field relay race between 6 AFC and 6 NFC players who take on different tasks in a challenging obstacle course. Sweat participated in the High Point Challenge, where he jumped on a trampoline and punched out a football in 3 consecutive takes. And hopefully we won't get wrecked over. See it right here. And look at how fast. I mean, this is just absolutely bonkers what Montez Sweat is doing. Absolutely crushing the game. Coming through. And would you look at that? I mean, he is just annihilating this course. Jumped so high that he couldn't even catch himself almost at the very end. Now, would have been fun if you fell. Obviously, it would have been great for the Chicago Bears to be like, but he came through big time. Like, that was just fantastic to see him just blowing his way through this course. Then Caleb Williams camp. Now, there's 2 pieces to this, by the way. So I want to go over 2 things when we talk about Caleb Williams. And first was that Caleb Williams camp refutes Colin Cowherd's anti-Bears narrative. Now, Colin Cowherd came out and said that he indicated that Williams had no interest in playing for Chicago. However, moving forward, he has now issued an apology. Now, that apology came in this moment a day later. Okay, so I got a call from Caleb Williams' camp, and this is a correction here. Okay. So I got a call from Caleb Williams' camp, and they went, whoa, Colin. We don't want to be painted as anti-Chicago, and we don't want to be painted as anti-Bear. And they made it clear to me. They said, listen, we don't want to go to a city that doesn't care. Chicago cares. They're big, they're loud, they're passionate. They fire coaches all the time. They care. We don't want to go to some Sunbelt place where you tarp off the upper deck. And they did say there is a path to success in Chicago. It's called the Houston Texans. Defensive coach, couple of weapons, cap space, good pick. They've got a second pick. There's a bunch of different receivers out there. Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunzi. They can go and get another weapon. So what basically Caleb Williams did, and what the camp of Caleb Williams did, is validate everything that we've been saying since the beginning, that, cheat code. The NFL cheat code is that you go out, you get yourself a nice, a strong defensive set, Get yourself a couple of weapons, have plenty of cap space in order to fill in the gaps, and then boom, you bring in a rookie quarterback to learn the system and adapt and get better along the way, and then boom, now you find yourself in the Super Bowl. And they did point out Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze as the potential weapons. Now, the other thing that became the issue, and this is the issue, and this is where the disconnect happened. And the issue that the concern that the camp of Caleb Williams had is, I do think it's possible that Washington trades up and Chicago allows Washington to trade up because Caleb and his group do not want to go to Chicago. He's from the DC area. I think Dan Quinn is considered. The big concern for Caleb Williams, and you have to admit this, is where you land matters, and Chicago has never developed a star quarterback. So really have a slap in the face of Chicago, right? That's what Colin Cowherd said. Now, this means they did have this conversation, okay? They did say, I do think it's possible that Washington trades up and Chicago allows Washington to trade up. So they did have this conversation with Colin Cowherd. Now, then that's when they had to go back and clarify, we're not saying we don't want to go to Chicago. What we're saying is we want to use the Houston Texans approach. The Houston Texans approach, of course, was copied from the Kansas City Chiefs. Of course, on down the line, that's where you bring in a young quarterback, you get a nice solid defense, you get yourself a good team around somebody who's building, and that's your quote-unquote cheat code to win. Now, so Williams is okay with the Bears drafting him. Many of the media are focused on that part of the story. But Williams' team sent a bold ask of the Bears in its discussion with Cowherd. Williams is making it known he's okay with Chicago drafting him if it plans to build around him. Williams camp even knows what it wants Poles to do with the number 9 pick in the 2024 draft. He wants a wide receiver. Williams can ask for the Bears to take a wide receiver with that pick, but once draft night happens, that's out of his hands. Neighbors or Odunze might be off the board by the time the Bears pick at 9. Williams wouldn't have much leverage once the Bears take him at number 1, but would Williams be willing not to sign his rookie contract and force the Bears to trade him if Poles isn't as aggressive in building the offense during the draft as he would like? Guys, what you're looking at is some genuine concerns about Caleb Williams, not in his ability, but again, it goes back to what we continue to say. And make sure, by the way, that you're hitting the like button on the way in. Helps push me up in the algorithm, gets more eyes looking at the prize, if you will. But the important thing is what you're seeing here is you're starting to see cracks in the mental makeup here. Caleb Williams wants things to be his way in order to get here. And I don't think we as fans, we shouldn't like that. We should recognize, by the way, that if we pick Caleb Williams, the logical move would be to pick up a wide receiver. The logical move would be to go out and get a Calvin Ridley, would be to go out and make sure that you get Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors or even Brock Bowers, would be to make sure that you have the talent around him to ensure him an opportunity for success. But the fact that he is not making demands, but subtly hinting exactly what he wants to happen, and then reminding people that he's from the Washington, D.C. area and would actually prefer Washington. Those kind of things are not the things that make somebody a great leader, that's mental makeup. That should lead to just tiny questions that you should have in your mind about Caleb Williams. Now, the question would then be for me is if I'm moving on from Justin Fields, and here's the thing, I'm not shooting down Caleb Williams because I prefer Justin Fields. Ryan Poles can make whatever choice he wants, but when you're comparing two similar athletes, you have to go with the one who's in the right headspace, don't you? And that leads me to maybe the move is Drake May, and potentially we could be looking at a situation in which the Bears move down in the draft, pick up some extra draft picks, and end up taking Drake May instead of Caleb Williams, because little things like this do matter. So we should be at least paying attention to the signs, and those signs are a little bit peculiar for the things that you're getting here from Williams. Look, I'm just happy to be in the NFL. That's what you're hoping for when you get this guy. I just want to prove myself, and I want to prove that I'm the best. Andrew Luck, I don't remember any demands from Andrew Luck. So, when you look at number one overall picks, I don't know that there's a lot of demands from those guys. I think that speaks to a little bit in the makeup, in the mental makeup of somebody. And again, that might just be me. That might just be me nitpicking, but I don't think that I am. I think that that's important when you're looking at somebody to draft who's going to be the franchise. That's the guy that leads your team. So we know the mental makeup of Justin Fields has been actually phenomenal despite the performance on the field not being as good as we want. We've seen flashes of brilliance, but we've also seen fumble after fumble after fumble. We've seen problems with the offense. We've seen a 53.4 quarterback rating in the fourth quarter. Not that great. We've seen all of the problems here, but we've seen a leader. We've seen him be a leader. So that's the kind of mental makeup I would like to have, along with the performance level as well. So Caleb brings that. Cool. Let's go. If he doesn't, do we move on to Drake May? Or do we stick with Justin? I mean, there is a genuine question here to be had. Not just, by the way, not just because of talent, but because of this moment right here. His team reaching out to Colin Cowherd to get their message out that maybe he would want to go to Washington instead, not being anti-Bears, just wanting to go home, so to speak, and then saying, no. We mean we'll go to Chicago, but and that doesn't sound great. That sounds like an issue that the Bears are going to have to make a decision on. So, but in the meantime, let's move on to free agency and let's talk about what is going on in free agency now. Calvin Ridley has been deemed a fit for the Chicago Bears, and then the question becomes, could it work? With DJ Moore in place, Chicago could get two players who are interchangeable as X receivers up on the line, and as a good move, Z receivers with alignment versatility. Both can create separation vertically, but Ridley could take the top off the defenses even more and let Moore utilize his high end after the catch abilities at the short and intermediate levels. So there's a real dynamic here that could play out. So here's the question though. Would Calvin Ridley make it to free agency? After reading through the post, I'm reminded that you'll have to have a better idea of Chicago Bears' potential draft target. The Kansas City Chiefs also pop up as a logical future destination for Calvin Ridley. In other words, don't go buying these Calvin Ridley Bears jerseys just yet, but still keep him on your radar as you try to find offseason fits for Chicago's positions of need. So, what happens when you get Calvin Ridley? Does that change the makeup of the Chicago Bears? Does that change the makeup of the draft? Well, it enormously changes the makeup of the draft. I do think that the important thing for me, which we'll get into a little bit later, is taking Marvin Harrison Jr. And I just don't feel that Caleb Williams is the best player. And I think that the consensus has always been to take the best player. But sometimes you need a quarterback, right? And I think there's other teams that need a quarterback more than the Bears need a quarterback. So I think that that's an opportunity to stockpile draft picks and then still get the best player in the draft, which I'm going to contend probably until draft day that it is Marvin Harrison Jr. as the best player in this draft. So the question becomes, will he make it to free agency? Josh Allen is going to be a Jaguar next year, says GM Trent Baalke. Jaguars linebacker Josh Allen, coming off a 17 and a half sack season, will be a free agent. Baalke said negotiations haven't started yet, but definitive Allen will be in Jacksonville. Franchise tag available if they need to use it. Now, here, if you're looking in between the lines here, Calvin Ridley isn't getting the franchise tag because it will ultimately go to defensive end Josh Allen. Now, that could change if Allen and the Jags do come to a long-term extension before the tag decision has to go down. So there is some potential here for some problems. But do the Bears need a Calvin Ridley type? So DJ Moore was an awesome last year in his first year with the Chicago Bears in 2023, set career best in catches, yards, and touchdowns, and he put together a whale of a highlight reel. Cole Kmet had a breakout year as a pass-catching tight end. Like Moore, he had career high 73 and yardage. Have to admit that fully healthy Kmet down the stretch would have snagged 2 more touchdown catches or set a new career best in that department too. But with that being said, Moore and Kmet were the only 2 reliable targets for Justin Fields last year. And for me, it is unacceptable to have just 2 guys who give a quarterback confidence to target without fear. This is where players like Calvin Ridley come into play if he hits free agency. The suspension for violating the NFL's gambling policy throws things for a loop. Would the Bears target someone who will be 2 years removed from being connected to such an unsavory story arc? The answer to that is a resounding yes. He would be, of course. Make sure you hit the like button, by the way, on the way in. Thank you so much for tuning in. But from a straight up football standpoint, Calvin Ridley makes so much sense for a Bears target. Look, I don't care anything about the gambling thing. Look, we can have an argument and a debate about gambling in the NFL, or if a player is gambling or something. I mean, look, this is talent first, at least in my opinion. I think that at least these guys are smart enough not to bet on their own games. So this really doesn't work out for me as a thing, and certainly not against the game, because your career is over, right? Your career is over. But here's the other part that would concern me. You only have Calvin Ridley for a couple years before you start to see a precipitous sort of decline, at least in my estimation. Ridley is 29. He caught 76 passes for 1,000 yards and added eight touchdowns for the Jags. Now, this would be a good get. This is every bit the equivalent player of a DJ Moore statistically. So a great opportunity. There's a track record of excellence with Ridley, which makes him such an interesting target. But it won't be Ridley filling the wide receiver 2 hole. We've previously discussed Tampa Bay Buccaneers Mike Evans as a possible target. So these are the 3 guys that are out there right now as a potential for the Bears in free agency: Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley, and Curtis Samuels. So you're looking at, and by the way, these are different guys, right? Curtis Samuel is, of course, friends with DJ Moore. Mike Evans is in his 30s. We always think he's on the decline, but he never declines. I mean, this is a possession receiver. This is a guy who he will keep this team moving down the field. Like, that's the kind of guy who creates separation. He gives the quarterback every opportunity to make that winning throw. And then, of course, you have Calvin Ridley and Curtis Samuel. It comes in a little less expensive than the rest of these guys. So be intriguing to see what happens this year for these selections. So if they happen, awesome. If they don't, we're still looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, I think we're going to find out March 15. I think March 13 is when free agency starts. So if that's the case, then we're going to know way before the draft which direction the Bears are going to go. Right now, we're just kind of speculating. We're kind of getting into the position right now of where we're going to try to figure it out. Let me know if you have a choice here between Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley, and Curtis Samuel. Which one of these guys would you like to see on this team if these are the options? Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley, or Curtis Samuel? Let me know in the chat. I'm actually kind of interested to see who it is that we really have a consensus on, because I like each one of them for a different reason. Then moving on, we do have this article that came out from Heavy. Heavy has not been right about anything on any team, anywhere, anyhow. So I do have to stress that before we move on with this, and say that they're projecting a trade for Justin Fields for a $10.4 million playmaker. Justin Fields for Kyle Pitts and a draft pick. That's one bold possibility that ESPN is putting forth as the Chicago Bears explore their options for 2024. In ESPN's preview guide for the 2024 offseason, Aaron Schatz makes big predictions for each of the 32 teams and projects the Atlanta Falcons to trade to acquire Fields from the Bears. He also suggested in return that Chicago would receive the number 4 overall. He would receive Pitts and the number 4 overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft as part of the trade competition. The Falcons will use Pitts as part of a package to pry quarterback Justin Fields away from the Bears before Chicago uses the number 1 overall pick on a new starting quarterback. Belief around the league that the Bears will use the number 1 overall pick on Caleb Williams has continued to build as the NFL scouting combine draws nearer. However, it's not really it's not really that slam dunk of a deal. As you guys will notice, as we go through some of these right now and we start to look at different draft analysis, a lot of people are now predicting the Bears to move on from Caleb Williams because of this backdoor machination that's been going on. And then the question would be, what were the stats on Kyle Pitts last year? And it looks like For last year. And by the way, this really this fixes that Brock Bowers question that you might have had, or that anybody might have had when looking at a potential, at a potential move here. You've got 53 receptions, 667 yards. Now, the question that you're going to have to ask yourself is: this an upgrade to Cole Kmet? And then what do you do about Cole Kmet? And then, and by the way, Kyle Pitts, great player, but 3 touchdowns, average 12.6 yards. Is this the guy who's worth Justin Fields? I mean, the answer to that might be yes. I mean, it might be yes. It might be now you've got a nice 2 tight end set. Maybe this makes perfect sense. Make sure, by the way, that you're hitting the like button on the way in. But somebody like a Kyle Pitts comes in, and now you've got a 2 tight end set that just really looks dominant. You have 2 guys who can pass protect and get open, and create opportunities in the short passing game. So you make that move. And guys, listen, hear me out here, because again, I do want to stress it would be my preference for Justin Fields. But if this were to happen, and now you're in a 2 tight end set, and you have the opportunity to draft either Caleb Williams or Drake May, maybe even trade down with Washington in order to get that Drake May pick, and you still have these tremendous options here. What if you're able to reach into the 9 and get Rome Odunze or even Malik Neighbors? What if you're able to just get that lucky and build this team completely around all of this? And then you haven't even moved on to picking up your center. You haven't even moved on to I want to say that we still want to look at the left tackle position, but let's just say the center position is the only one that we really have a dire need. Let's assume that Eric Washington probably has a good did I say Eric Washington? No. Let's just say that was it Hodling? The new offensive line coach has an idea of what he wants to do with Braxton Jones to improve him. So I don't believe I'm losing my mind all of a sudden. I can't even get the coaching names. Thomas Brown. Anyway, my brain just broke. So, but to get the most out of Braxton Jones would be optimal, because you still got Braxton Jones under contract. You don't have to worry about that. And I mean, I think the guy's been good and really wants to succeed. The only problem that you have is, what can you get out of Larry Borum? Or if anything, can you get anything out of Larry Borum? So this would change the dynamic of this team dramatically and would be pretty interesting. Now, that would mean Mercedes Lewis, who is a free agent, by the way, is gone and not on your payroll. And that would be fine, actually, because Mercedes 40 years old at this point. So by the time the season starts, he's going to be over 40. That's a lot. That's a lot for an over 40-year-old man to get up every day and go out here and do this. And of course, he's not going to make any catches for you. So you're not going to get 53 catches from Mercedes Lewis. You're opening up some more options if you have a guy like Kyle Pitts. So we'll see how this thing plays out, but that is an idea. Next up, here is another one. This is Jaylon Johnson, of course. He said, my heart's in Chicago, but my mind's definitely on the money. And the question is, how much is it going to cost? Now, Sports Track said that it would cost probably in the neighborhood of 17 to 18 million. However, it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million that it's going to cost. And then you have to ask the question here, is it worth it? Is it worth $20 million for Jaylon Johnson? Now, my heart is on Chicago, and my heart says, yes, it 100% is something I want to see Jaylon Johnson. I want to see an elite guy. I want to see some elite guys on this defense continue to be here. So I want Jaylon Johnson to be in that backfield. But we drafted Tyreek Stevenson and Terrell Smith, and both of them are very, very good so far and have had great seasons. So it's not out of the way at this point to see that Jaylon Johnson could be on his way out. Make sure, by the way, that you hit the like button on the way in. It could be that we just move on and we just continue drafting or bringing people in through free agency, and maybe Jaylon Johnson, we don't get that $20 million Jaylon Johnson. And look, a lot of people are saying things like, well, he's playing really good because he's in his contract season. Look, it's not about him playing good in his contract season. It's about he has the ability to play good. And that's up to him and the coaches to decide whether or not that's who he is. Does he want to be that guy? If he wants to be that guy, we want him in Chicago. It's worth $20 million to have him in Chicago. But now you have $25 million in Montez Sweat. You got $20 million in Jaylon Johnson. You got $18 million in Eddie Jackson, which means that Eddie Jackson has to go because you have to free up. You're going to have to free up that payroll, period. There's no way that payroll does not get wiped out. So Eddie Jackson would be gone for sure if you're going to re-sign Jaylon Johnson. So, but he says, my heart's definitely in Chicago. My mind is definitely on the money. We'll figure it out if we can make them both come together and get something done. I'm looking forward to see what's to come. The Bears drafted Johnson in the second round of the 2020 draft, and he quickly made a name for himself as one of the top coverage corners in the NFL. But Johnson's takeaway numbers were lacking compared to the elite cornerbacks around the league. So the Bears challenged him at the beginning of the year to force more turnovers, and come through he did. With 4 interceptions. And guys, you saw them on the field. They were beautiful interceptions. So he delivered a career-high 4 interceptions, plus forced fumbles, plus a forced fumble in 14 games. More impressively, he did it without taking a step back in pass coverage. His 33.3 passer rating allowed when targeted led all NFL corners with a minimum of 100 pass coverage snaps. His 50% completion rate allowed tied for 7th best in the same group. His 20.2 snaps per reception allowed was 5th best. On the rare occasion that Johnson did give up a catch, he largely limited the damage. Johnson's 7.8 yards per reception allowed was tied for 10th best mark. For his effort, he was recognized for the Pro Bowl and All-Pro honors for the first time in his career. I mean, guys, this is a guy who has been an elite receiver, so or a elite cornerback. So the question would be, do you keep him for $20 million? I mean, again, you're just look. This is moving payroll. Okay, this is just moving your payroll from your free safety position to your cornerback position. Now you just got to do something about the free safety position. If you can plug somebody in who's solid, who's good at around the same payroll that you're giving Jaylon Johnson, you just flip the script on it, right? And you're good. You're in a great position. So that's what I think is happening here. We'll see what happens. Okay, so Bears picked as a landing spot for projected $13.5 million running back Austin Ekeler seems to be on the map here. He's not expected to return to the Chargers in 2024, and he's 29, so you got 3 years out of him, maybe. I mean, that is a little bit old for a running back, but the potential certainly exists that he could end up being available at a competitive rate. Maybe not 13.5 million though. I mean, I think that's too expensive for the position, especially considering. And look, we could debate it because we did talk about Saquon Barkley at one point, but and Derrick Henry being available. Look, I like Khalil Herbert. I like Roschon Johnson. I don't think that we need to move on. I even like Travis Homer. I don't think he's great, but I think he's a serviceable backup in case we need it. And Deonta Foreman was admirable. I mean, incredibly admirable in this position. And he was pushed by Khalil Herbert for that starting role. So, I don't think there's a problem in the running back room. And I don't know that one of these guys makes us better. Now, when I say that, that is still Austin Ekeler. That is still Saquon Barkley. That is still Derrick Henry. There are still guys out here that just, there are some options here. Make sure you hit the like button, by the way, on the way in, and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out tremendously. But you look at this, and there's a lot. Here we go. Austin Ekeler is far more proven than the current Bears running back, and that is a good point. However, I still, if I have the preference here, I'm moving on from this. I'm not making this move. I prefer Khalil Herbert. I prefer Roschon Johnson to anybody in that lineup, and that includes Saquon Barkley. Even though I understand Austin Ekeler, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, these are game-changing brutes, basically. But I like what I saw from Khalil Herbert, and he's going to get better. I like what I saw from Roschon Johnson, and he's only going to get better. I like what I see from these guys, and I want to see a little more of them. So if I'm choosing, I'm not going with this selection, but that is out there. Also, we got another one here, and it's Brad Biggs reveals Chicago Bears free agency plans may be unexpected. So the center also looms as a position of need for the Bears, and it's going to be interesting to see how they attack it. They could go the free agency route, but I'm expecting them to be less active than they were a year ago in the open market. It would be a bit of an upset if there were a bigger deal to be done than the one the Bears try to hammer out with Jaylon Johnson. It wouldn't be surprising if the team considered some veterans in free agency to anchor the line, but you can't rule out the draft. This lines up with the Chicago Bears' preferred strategy, which appears to be building through the draft. Remember, Ryan Poles stated from the moment he took over his goal was to build through the draft. That means becoming far less reliant on free agency to fill holes in the roster, and it looks like we might be in that position. Our building, Darnell Wright, Tyreek Stevenson, and Gervon Dexter, that even Zach Pickens, Terrell Smith, it's all been done through the draft. So I think maybe we're looking at this, and these guys are throwing out Austin Eckler. You're throwing out here Calvin Ridley, throwing out Mike Evans, you're throwing out Curtis Samuel, you're throwing out all of these free agents here. They may not be part of this equation. It might be that we're going to stand pat and we're going to build and we're just going to plug holes in this team as we move along. That might just be the move that we're going with. So free agency going to be certainly really, really, really interesting. But now we're going to talk about the draft. And the first thing that I wanted to do, the most important to me, and you can have your own strategy and you can have your own belief system about this anyway. It is my belief that your responsibility and your obligation to your team is to take the best available player, right? That is what we're told. That is what the alpha is when you're in the NFL. And the question always comes up, well, shouldn't you take the best position player if you have something, or blah, 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 blah. There's always that question, and it's a fair enough question. Again, every team always seems to need a quarterback. And if you want to take a quarterback who is not as good as the best player in the league or the best player coming out, sometimes you have that necessity and sometimes you have to do it, because what good is it to have a player that you can't get the ball to or something like that? So you need a quarterback, and it's understood that you need a quarterback. But without fail, the best player in this draft, and if you go look at any of these lists, is number one, Marvin Harrison Jr. Like that's the alpha in all of this. The number one player, Marvin Harrison Jr., has massive expectations to live up to as the son of a Hall of Famer, but he's already shown that he can handle the pressure. He's not only a top NFL prospect, but a generational one, rivaling the likes of Jamar Chase and AJ Green. At 6'4", 205 pounds, Harrison makes difficult tasks like sinking, separating, and catching the ball look effortless. He excels in all aspects of wide receiver play, from outmaneuvering defensive back and finding space to make explosive plays that can change the game. In 2023, Harrison reminded us of his elite skill set and added to it. His straight line speed was on full display against Youngstown. Against Penn State, he generated big plays with previously unseen run after the catch ability. And versus Wisconsin and Michigan State, he won with gravity-defying body control and contortion ability. He's truly a complete wide receiver one. So imagine having, basically 2X receivers on your team that have the ability to perform multiple different functions. He's got the speed. DJ Moore's got the speed. Your slot receiver. This is where you keep Darnell Mooney and you try as best you may to get the most that you can out of Darnell Mooney, get him more involved in your offense, and you don't go too far away. You've got two incredible, and this one is generational. This is the number one guy in the draft. Then you have number two, Drake May, by the way, comes up number two in the ProFootballNetwork.com list of top players. Do you notice a name missing here? I just want to point this out. Number two is Drake May. In 2022, Drake May completed 342 out of 517 passes for 4,300 yards, 38 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions. His stats weren't as pretty as in 2023, but the high-level blend of physical talent and anticipatory savvy is still there on tape. May is a talented quarterback who makes the game look easy with his athleticism and layering ability. Despite that the consensus may suggest he's at the top of the class with Williams, and it should be a close call for QB1. So we went from generational talent. We went from Caleb Williams is generational talent. Caleb Williams has to be this guy, to this analysis of the best players in the game. Caleb Williams is not even number one or two. Let's at least consider this for a second. At 6'4", 229 pounds, May is an effortless mover in the mold of Justin Herbert, who has the athleticism and elite arm talent to elevate the offense both inside and outside of structure. His ability to anticipate windows and manipulate defenders sets him apart. And then at number 3, you have Caleb Williams. And then at number 4, you have Joe Alt from Notre Dame. And then number 5, you have Olu Fashanu. Then you have Malik Neighbors, Brock Bowers, Terrion Arnold, and then Talise Fuagua. Then you have Drazon Newton. Then you have Roma Dunzi. So who do you take number 1 now? I mean, there's no consensus here. Or at least this list right here gives you kind of an idea here that maybe, just maybe, we should not reconsider on Caleb Williams, but we should be paying attention to every sign and every signal. But let's move on because we're talking draft here. 6 players who stood out during the 2024 Senior Bowl despite having a horrible practice. One of those is surprisingly Bo Nix. But number 1, Spencer Rattler. And look, can we agree that he looks like Josh Dobbs a lot? Can we agree on that? At one point in time, quarterback Spencer Rattler was deemed a future number 1 overall pick. That was before his backup Caleb Williams stole the show at Oklahoma. The Bears won't be taking Rattler in this draft, but the team that does gets the 2024 Senior Bowl MVP. He capped off a strong week with a great game. He went 4-4, 65 yards, and a touchdown. And then so did Bo Nix, who had a horrible week. Couldn't find a receiver in practice to save his life. He went 4-5 for 21 yards and a score. Bo Nix, who really did not account for himself very well in the Senior Bowl practices, did come through in the game. Then you have Charles Smith Wade, cornerback from Washington State. He made the play of the day late in the game. He turned into a defensive struggle as quarterback Sam Hartman and Joe Milton were unable to get anything going. Milton served up the interception for Smith Wade, who made a diving catch to secure the ball. Then you have Luke McCaffrey. Guys, how interesting would it be to see Luke McCaffrey, brother, by the way, of Christian McCaffrey, showing up on the Chicago Bears, maybe even being available in the 2nd or 3rd round as a backup wide receiver in the event that the talent doesn't match up. But as you can see right here, you're going to see what they call crazy good catches coming out of Luke McCaffrey, despite, again, I don't know what the work ethic is like for these guys or the team, but Luke McCaffrey showed himself and accounted for himself very well. Then you have Charles Turner, who is a guard center in position here. It's difficult to gauge offensive line play during a Senior Bowl, but this guy did a very, very good job. So then you have Braden Fisk, who, look at this. This guy is just making his way through the line. So definitely a lot of good options came out of the Senior Bowl. Make sure you go check that out if you are interested. And now we have Ryan Poles dropping a bombshell on fans in a mock draft from Bears Goggles On. And we're on page 1 here. So this says blah, 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 blah. And who did he take number 1 at the 9 pick? And here it is. Oh, by the way, I should have pointed this out. This says that that he trades down. He trades down and takes Jared Verse. Nice Louisville Cardinal hat there, by the way. But he takes Jared Verse at number 9. Now, if you've been listening to me for any length of time, you know that Jared Verse is one of my passion guys. That's a defensive end that I think is a really great player, really fine motor that just never quits. And I think that he would be a fantastic addition on the opposite side of the field next to Montez Sweat to collapse that pocket and push it up into the defensive line. So I think that he is a fantastic acquisition. So, but in the first trade, the Bears acquire the number 3 overall pick and the number 34. The Saints then offer the house, thus allowing Ryan Poles to parlay the number 1 overall selection into 14th, 34th, 45th, 176th, and then the 2025 first round. So, truthfully, Poles could probably get more, but those trades followed the draft value trade chart, so that's what we went with. And the first thing we picked up, is there a difference in the play style between Montez Sweat and Jared Verse? Not really, but both players would be great edge defenders with a solid pocket push. They wouldn't be bending the edges, but breaking them with these two. Then moving down into the draft at number 14, you pick up Jackson Powers Johnson, center from Oregon. shoring up one of the holes that you really have in the defense. And by the way, I'm excited about this entire draft that this guy came up with, despite the fact that it doesn't pick any of the pieces that I would really like to see. I mean, again, you're passing on Marvin Harrison Jr., which to me seems just nonsense. You have the first pick. It just seems like nonsense, but we're going along with it because they got my guy Jared Verse. Then you have Jackson Powers Johnson showing up as center at the number 14 selection. Then you moved a little bit deeper and you pick up Michael Penix, quarterback from Washington in the second round as a serviceable backup. And you may Penix is a older, beat up version of Drake May. I truly believe the Chicago Bears want their quarterback. It might be May. If they elect to roll with the draft picks and fix the broken team, they can grab the left-handed version of May later in the draft, just in case they wanted to do that. So then you have in the second round, Chris Jenkins, a defensive lineman, desperate, by the way, for a defensive lineman. So, and by the way, this is a Michigan guy. So, I mean, he's been coached pretty well, right? By Jim Harbaugh. So maybe so. And then in Jaylon Wright, a running back from Tennessee, that shores up. If you're going to move on from Deonta Foreman and you need a serviceable backup, then you have that opportunity right there with Jaylon Wright. Now, does it make the Chicago Bears running back room better? I don't think that it does. I think that Deonta Foreman would be a good addition here, better than drafting Jaylon Wright potentially. But you also have to consider Khalil Herbert's going to be a free agent at some point soon. So you're going to need a serviceable backup. Maybe you're considering that Travis Homer might not be that guy. Travis Homer, though, I thought did a great job. So, but we'll see what happens there. Then moving further down in the fourth round, Jaden Hicks is a safety out of, and this could be the guy that replaces Eddie Jackson, and you just go with the young guy Jaden Hicks. Jaden, Jaquan, and Jalen. I don't know. You got to come up with 3J or something like that. There's got to be some kind of way. Then you got TJ in there too. Jesus Christ. That's going to be an interesting backfield if this were to happen. So anyway, so we're watching out for that. Let's move on to the next one. Chicago Bears mock draft, an important draft poll. By the way, it should be noted that we just went through another mock draft, and that mock draft, guess what? No moving of Justin Fields. This offseason for the Chicago Bears rebuild. Now, look, we've got this one, and here, number 4 overall, somehow or another. This is not going to happen, by the way, but number 4 overall, Marvin Harrison Jr. That's getting Marvin Harrison Jr. And look, I just don't see how I don't see how anybody is considering that Arizona is going to pick a quarterback or move away from Kyler Murray. I don't think that is in their cards. I mean, it could be because Kyler Murray did not perform well towards the end of the season, but this would mean that they traded with Arizona the first pick, and then they moved to the 4, and then they end up getting Marvin Harrison Jr. And that is assuming that Arizona goes with Caleb Williams or Drake May, and that number 2, Washington goes with the other one that's available. And then the New England Patriots at number 3 go for Jaden Daniels. Like, you really have to have all 3 of those for sure getting ready to happen before you move down this far, because now you're going to be missing out on Marvin Harrison Jr. if you go any further down. So, but that's the move. That's the play right there. Then at number 9, Jared Verse comes up again as your defensive end, your edge rusher to collapse the pocket with Montez Sweat. Again, a good selection overall. Like, guys, this shores up a lot of the problems that you have with your team. And then number 27, again, he comes up, Jackson Powers Johnson at number 27. You're getting the center that you want for the future. And then you have Troy Fautanu, an offensive guard out of Washington to help your offensive line a little bit. Not for Tevin Jenkins so much, but for Nate Davis, most probably. That's who you're looking for a replacement for. And then you have Malachi Corley, wide receiver out of Western Kentucky at the 75 pick. And then, going down from there. But you're starting to see something develop here. Again, not moving on from Justin Fields here. Now, simulating a trade down for the Bears. What does this one say? And these are all coming out in the last couple of days. And usually it's based on what people are seeing. Now, the Commanders drafted Williams this time because the Bears traded the number 1 for the number 2, which is starting to become something that people are talking about. And that puts Marvin Harrison Jr. at the number 2 spot. I think that's high, but look, you don't take the number 1, generally speaking. And by the way, it's a generational talent. You take the best player available. But if you can move down and you can have assurances that you're not going to lose your guy, then you make that move, right? Plus, you get Marvin Harrison for $8 million instead of $9 million for a couple years. And it's, look, you're splitting hairs over it, but a little cheap on that is good enough for me. But you're picking up Marvin Harrison Jr. at the number 2 selection because, again, you want the 6'4", 205-pound monster out here. Then you have defensive end Latu. Again, I do not like this. I prefer Jared Verse, but look at this. The guy has talent. The guy has motor. The guy can do whatever you want. Then you pick up Zach Frazier as a center out of West Virginia. You're noticing some similarities here, and you're starting to see something develop. You're starting to see a lot of these mock drafts are and this is from Sports Illustrated, by the way. And you're starting to see that now they're starting to talk about Justin Fields maybe staying, and that you're building around him because you're looking at the people here. And by the way, it should be noted, and we didn't address this first, but we probably should have. Cliff Kingsbury is getting a new job, and let's go over here and look at that one. By the way. Cliff Kingsbury is now the Washington Commanders offensive coordinator. And that's the guy, by the way, who has the history with Caleb Williams. So did we just learn something? Caleb Williams congratulates Cliff Kingsbury on social media following the hiring as the Commanders offensive coordinator. So, guys, starting to see something develop here in that the Bears, maybe in the back, we're starting to make moves here. And those moves are going to be moving on from the Caleb Williams talk. It might just be. Now, that, by the way, leads us to this one, which is NBC Chicago, which every day, NBC Chicago, love them, comes up with some random stuff that you're just like, what? So let's see what they're doing right now. So if the Washington Commanders end up hiring Cliff Kingsbury to be their next OC, would that shake up the draft? So here's the question now. Trade. The Bears send the number 1 overall pick, the number 110, and 2025 fifth round, blah, 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 blah. We've seen NFL teams do wild things. And at number 2, Chicago Bears trade down and take Drake May as quarterback from North Carolina. Another North Carolina quarterback. Whew, we can't help ourselves, right? But we take number 2, Drake May. Then at number 9, Jaylon Newton, defensive tackle. I don't know that we need a defensive tackle as much as, guys, I think we could get by with Justin Jones, Zach Pickens, Gervon Dexter. I think that we really have what we need at defensive tackle, and that we could build in a later portion of the draft, and that what we really need is the ability to collapse that pocket on the edge. But if I'm going to go with somebody who's a defensive tackle, I want the best. And Jaylon Newton was the best defensive tackle, and he's in Illinois, so he's not moving very far. Then you got Troy Franklin from that extra pickup that you just got from the Commanders. So you got Troy Franklin, wide receiver from Oregon. A good choice, not a great choice, but you got somebody. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. However, it gets better as you go down because number 40, you pick up an edge rusher, Jonah Ellison. Number 75, you pick up Roman Wilson out of Michigan. Again, well-coached Jim Harbaugh guy and a star on his team. So, there's some options here, and you're starting to look at some of this stuff. Looks kind of good. So, but again, you're missing out on Marvin Harrison Jr. You're missing out on a lot of great players in this quest, if you will. So yeah, a little bit weird there. And there we go. All right, guys, we made it. So I hope everybody is enjoying that. If you haven't already, please hit the like button. And by the way, we're going to end up, and we're going to go backwards here a little bit. Let's say the Bears pass on Caleb Williams by trading the pick to Washington. Either way, Fields is gone. The Bears will grab May with the second pick instead. And that is a potential, the thing here that we have to consider. Again, it comes down to money. You have to pay. You're getting Justin Fields inexpensive for next year, $6 million. But then after that, you're going to have to pay him at least $25 million. And then if you want to keep him, probably 40. So you're putting a lot of money into your quarterback position. Now, you might be arguing, saying, well, the cheat code in the NFL is specifically to bring in that young quarterback. Well, yeah, because you got Brock Purdy and you got a great team around Brock Purdy, and it worked out pretty well. But countless times it hasn't. And Tom Brady wouldn't have, like, what is it, 19 Super Bowls? And Patrick Mahomes has been to 4 Super Bowls now. And Patrick Mahomes just signed one of those giant contracts 2 years ago. So, we say that that's the cheat code, but I don't think so. And Benjamin Ariza says maybe we get Jaden Daniels. I don't care about May. I don't care about Jaden Daniels as much. I think he's a better athlete, but if we want a better athlete, we already have. I mean, look, we already have Justin Fields when it comes down to that. So I don't know that I don't know that we're getting better at the position with Jaden Daniels. Although I mean, the guy is electric. But here's the thing: Justin Fields was electric in college too. Like, that's, seeing the transition to the pros is a different thing entirely, and that's no disrespect to anybody, by the way. But it is different. So maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. It's not about money, it's about having quarterback talent, not according to the NFL. According to the NFL, it's about money. Alex says don't pick up the 5-year option, and if he balls out, you can simply pay him. That's what I think so too. But then the question, Alex, becomes, well, who do you pick up next year? I mean, Shedeur Sanders is going to be out there, and Alex Garrick is going to be out there. But then beyond that, I mean, what do you do for a quarterback at that point? Who do you have? Tyson Bagent. I love Tyson Bagent, but I don't know that he's a starter in the NFL. I know that he's a serviceable backup, and we know that he can do a good job. But can he do a great job in the NFL? I don't know the answer to that. So I would. This is the time when you get that quarterback, or at least that's what it looks like. You get the quarterback at this position or at this time. Make sure you hit the like button, by the way. You have to offer Fields a new deal after next season for 40 to 45 million. He won't risk this money on in the 5th year. That's exactly right. I mean, and look, by the way, if Fields balls out and he does everything, then you're going to pay him on the high end. You're going to pay the 45 million because he's going to be that guy. And now, how do you build a team around 45 million if you're not sure that Justin Fields can do the job? So there's some questions that you have to ask. So if the Bears do move on from Justin Fields, I understand. I don't want them to. My heart is still with Justin Fields. I want to see Justin Fields be successful in a Bears uniform, and I want to see him. And look, I really love to see these guys get around him and say, Justin's our guy. We are doing everything we can because we believe in Justin Fields. I would love to see that. But I also am a realist, and I understand there's a lot of money involved here. You're not paying a quarterback if that quarterback can't perform. Brock Purdy is the team. When Purdy got injured, the 49ers did nothing. Mahomes at 50 million per year, or that Giant quarterback at 40 million. Teams need to start paying quarterbacks what they're worth. It shouldn't be 50 million or nothing. I mean, teams aren't in control of that. I mean, ultimately, you can negotiate the best possible deal, and collusion is illegal. In case you didn't, it is illegal. So you cannot collude to keep prices down on players, because that is against that's a violation of the NFL rules. So you can't do anything about that. You have to play. You have to pay whatever fair market value is. Alex Fernandez says you can always go the free agent route or have a trade capital to move up next year. You can, and yes, it would be nice if you had it, but are you sure that Shedeur Sanders, who grades out a little bit under Caleb Williams at this point, gets better? And are you sure that Shedeur Sanders is the guy with the tools that you want? Are you sure that Alex Gallick is the guy that has the tools that you want? Like, is he going to improve? Like, who's going to come out of nowhere next year and change up everything in this draft? You don't really know yet what you're going to get, but or at least you have a reasonable idea this year that you've really got Caleb Williams, you've got Drake May, you've got Jaden Daniels. They all look pretty good. And look, we haven't even said J.J. McCarthy yet. J.J. McCarthy, he accounted himself very well winning a national title. So there are quarterbacks in this draft, like maybe, and matter of fact, maybe, how interesting would it be? I'm just going to say this. How interesting would it be for you to move down in this draft a little bit, get Marvin Harrison Jr., and at the 9 pick, take J.J. McCarthy, and then tell him you're going to sit behind Justin Fields at least this year. And then here we go. Then we have somebody, and this is always going to happen, right? We have somebody who says the guy who just won a national title, the guy that just beat everybody for a national title is horrible. That's the kind of stuff that you're going to get. And it's because we don't want that guy, right? It's because we like Justin Fields more, or we like Caleb Williams more, or for some reason, the guy, the winner, the proven winner, we're going to argue about. I don't know. I don't see how anyone can say Fields is still my guy. It's been 3 years with mediocre quarterback play, especially. Well, that's you, man. That's you. So, and by the way, there's a lot of people who are going to agree with you. Almost 20% of the fans of the Chicago Bears, or 1/5 of them, agree with you. So, I mean, that's not. I mean, it's not a majority, but it's not nothing. If there's a million fans, 200,000 of them agree with you. 800,000 want Justin Fields back. But I mean, it's just math. You know what I mean? Like 10 million people around this area. So 2 million people don't like Justin Fields. So you can have a party of Justin Fields haters, but most people, 80% of the fans want to see Justin Fields return. And it looks like 100% of the Chicago Bears want to see Justin Fields return. What you're basically saying is that 80% of the people and all of the players are idiots. And that's a little bit weird. It seems like you're the problem, not them, at least mathematically. So if you disagree, that's okay. That's okay. That's why we're here to have that debate. That's why we're here to argue these points, because I'm not sure I'm right about Justin Fields. I could, next year. Look, I liked, by the way, Mitchell Trubisky, and and I like Jay Cutler too. I knew the problems with Jay Cutler going in, but I like Jay Cutler as a choice and as a selection. Like, I really liked Jay Cutler, and I thought, man, he's going to make the Chicago Bears better. And I didn't. And by the way, I didn't know that the defensive line. I didn't know the offensive line was going to be as bad as it quickly became when Jay Cutler got here. And I thought that Jay Cutler wouldn't be as aloof, and I thought that he would care a little bit more, and I thought we would see him kind of as a rallying force and stuff like that. And he didn't do anything near what I thought, but and then Leonidas says a lot of fans are delusional and just root for whoever is the quarterback, and that's it. That's not delusional. That's called being a fan. That's not delusional. That's fan. You love your team. You support your team. So there's nothing wrong with that. And by the way, it's not entirely true, because when you see somebody who doesn't do a good job and they suck, then you get rid of them, and you know that. That always happens. It's always happened. It's always happened. It's when you have somebody who's good that you like, and you see the talent, you don't think it was developed or something like that. That's when you develop that kind of affinity. So we'll see what happens. I don't know that. Look, I think that there are. I think Justin Fields can lead this team. I think that we should at least be honest and recognize that he appears to have some limitations, and then the questions become: can can the team overcome those limitations in coaching and turn those limitations into strengths? If that is the case, then Justin Fields is a great athlete who can keep plays alive. He can look downfield if he has whatever it is that he needs. Maybe it's too much. Maybe it's too much to make him that kind of guy. Maybe he just But here's the thing: what you guys cry about as, well, he's just not that good, or whatever your argument is, and it's a fair argument, by the way. I'm not saying that it's not a fair argument, but whatever your argument is, he's 112 quarterback rating quarterback in the first quarter. He's a 98 QBR quarterback in the second quarter. He's an 89 in the third quarter. It's a 53.4 in the fourth quarter that really brings everything that he's done down. So if you're telling me that Justin Fields isn't great, even though for 3 quarters he's playing really good football because of that fourth quarter, then I would posit that you, while I'm not arguing your point because I see it just like you do, that you're not looking at the coaching, or you're not seeing it as a problem, and I see it as a problem. And I see that some of that allows for him to not have success, that he was not coached to have success in that fourth quarter. And even if he were, I don't think that he's a fourth quarter quarterback. I don't think that he's a guy that when the game is on the line, he's going to give you a bunch of wins. I don't think that, by the way. But if he's giving me an 80 rating or an 85 QBR in the fourth quarter, if he's giving me anywhere near a 90 rating, then we're not even having this conversation. He's a dynamic player. And if the game is coached better around his talents and not around what Luke Getsy wants, then I think that this is a better person. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm about to close this out. If you would, leave a comment on this video and hit the like button on your way out. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow to do this one more time. And don't forget, we've got Bear Down with Bleeves and all of that kind of stuff. And there are hats available if anybody ever gets interested. We'll put up a link to that pretty soon. You guys have a good day, and we'll talk to you again